All right, thanks, Vikri. Let me go ahead and share the desktop. I hope you can see the screen, right? Hello.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. I hope all of you are staying safe and doing good. I know most of you are joining us from Sri Lanka. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining. For the next 60 minutes, I will be talking about two of the hottest topics among developers these days. One is around .NET 5, and the other one is around building cloud-native applications with Microsoft Azure. Before I dive into the topic, let me go ahead and introduce myself. I think Fikri introduced, but for those who don't know me, I am Sajidharan, working as a cloud solution architect in the One Commercial Partner Tech team, closely working with independent software vendors in the APAC region to help them to innovate solutions with Microsoft Azure. Prior to that, I was a software developers with multi-cloud experience, so it's a great thing to share my knowledge with fellow developers of same wavelength today, right? I also love to contribute to open source, so you could see me in all the social mediums, especially on Stack Overflow, Twitter, and I was a former MVP for developer technologies, unlike Fikri, who is holding the title for so long years, but I was MVP for just 2 years, right? I was also a GD on Angular, so you can reach out to me if you have any specific requirements on Angular. I'm also working with a couple of publications on certain books, reviewing them on Angular and Azure. I love to talk to developers who are building things on cloud, so feel free to ping me on any medium. Let's chat about the things that you are building. Also, you can reach out to me using these social handles, which are displayed here. And I also write things that I share with fellow developers around Azure, and also some of my blogs that covers, cloud native applications. As you know, exactly 1 month ago, we had the .NET Conf, and there were a lot of cool announcements around .NET 5, right? And we had Ignite in September, and there were various Azure updates as well. So even as a Microsoft employee, it has become very difficult to catch up with Azure updates and also .NET updates. It can be said that Azure and .NET are constantly evolving day by day. Today, I wanted to share some of the important updates on the .NET ecosystem and tools that .NET ecosystem provides, or you can leverage them to build cloud native applications on Azure. Before I dive into the session, I would like to give a shout out to the very important person who is running the show today. So let me dive into that slide. Any Sri Lankan developer who is into .NET must be knowing this person who is in the middle. It's none other than Fikri, right? Give a virtual round of applause to this greatest community contributor which I have known of. I met him back in 2012, but I'm not sure whether he remembers me that time. But till now, he remains the same person throughout the years, right? First of all, congratulations for running this event virtually. The only consistent meetup that I know in Sri Lanka is the .NET meetup. I think you deserve a big round of applause. He can be called as the Scott Hunter of Sri Lanka. Congrats to those volunteers who have been helping him, and also speakers who have been supporting him over the years. I think it's been incredible journey to get where we are today, and we couldn't have done it without the support of community developers over the years, right? Thanks to all who have been supporting to run these events. Yesterday, I was going through the community group and I obtained these pictures. Today, we have 5 sessions in total throughout the day, right? I know it's sort of a new experience for those who are joining remotely, but hope you can stay throughout the day, and then you can listen to the amazing talks from the amazing speakers who are also MVPs on different areas, which you can gain the knowledge from them, right? All right, I gave an introduction, and then let me dive into the agenda for this session. I wanted to have this session applicable to all the participants. Hence, I will start with the availability of .NET 5 for all the developers and what it provides to developers as ecosystem. Then I will dive into some of the important concepts or announcements which were made during the .NET Conf for developers. Also, it is very important that what Microsoft offers in cloud native space to build and deploy microservices applications to Azure. Also, it's not about talking about the importance of technology. I will show some of the customer scenarios with .NET 5, with .NET, which are mind-blowing, right? So you can go ahead and explore more stories on the .NET 5 page, which was released last month. I have two demos for today. One is to showcase how developers could easily get started with deploying solutions on Azure. And the second demo is on how you could build microservice applications with .NET and deploy it to the cloud easily with the project I, which was announced last month. I wanted to make this session interactive, so feel free to ask your questions in the chat window, or you can reach out to me offline, on any social mediums. All right. As you know, with the recent announcements that was in last month, .NET 5 is the next version of .NET Core, which we continue the journey of unifying the .NET platform. Right, under the name of One .NET, there are a list of unified set of libraries, tools, SDKs, and runtime. So .NET 5 is actually taking everything available in .NET Core, and then you are adding more several capabilities, and then cloud and web investment, such as smaller and faster file labs that use less memory in order to build microservice applications and also containerize application among different platforms across different operating systems. So ASP.NET Blazor WebAssembly, which allows you to write web UI in C# that runs completely in the browser, further unifying the platform so that developers can write code against the same base class libraries across different workloads. So .NET 5 also embraces the full Swagger support. As a developer, you might have to, spend time on writing the documentation, which you don't have to do anymore. It makes much easier to create testable, compatible web APIs with the documentation support, which is provided by the Open API. So you can spin up your services and then have the documentation in place. And then .NET 5 includes the full design time support for Windows desktop development, which was not available in the past, such as WinForms or WPF in Visual Studio, with the first and third-party control support called the Click One support, so that you can have a single file deployment for your customers. Adding to this, there are many runtime performance improvement support for Windows ARM64, and new feature support for languages such as C#9 and F# 5.0. These are some of the features highlighted in the .NET Conf, which you might be aware of. Let's talk about what .NET ecosystem provides for developers. As our CEO Satya Nadella mentioned, everything in the world runs on software, right? So starting from the mobile that you use to any transport service such as Uber that you make, everything runs on software. So in simple, any software you can build with .NET. So Microsoft has made a significant investment in .NET over the years, as well as unifying the ecosystem to support building literally anything. So from desktop to, if you're building games to the cloud, you can start building using .NET. So .NET is a general purpose programming language that enables all kinds of application scenarios. So starting from desktop to IoT things to artificial intelligence, you can use .NET as a language to build any kind of application. Most of you are familiar with the red t-shirt man from Microsoft, which is Scott Guthrie. As he mentioned, .NET is the only programming language that evolved over the period of years. Back in 1997 to 2020, there has been several announcements. If you are a fan of .NET, starting from MVC up to now .NET 5, it has evolved over the period of years, right? So you can see the growth in terms of what .NET provides as ecosystem. Once you learn one framework, you can easily pick up another from the features that we build. That's a story about .NET. So we are seeing significant growth in the .NET ecosystem, and here is here are a few data points that you can consider, or I would like to share. So .NET ecosystem reached over 2 million .NET developers using .NET Core. .NET Core has been ranked as the number one, actually in 2 years in a row, right, as the most loved framework on on Stack Overflow developer survey, which you can see from the recent results that came. And also Cloud Native Computing Foundation tracks the highest velocity projects on GitHub, which they measure the rate, the amount of rate the pull request has been coming to the particular repositories and how many have been accepted. Both .NET and ASP.NET projects ranks in the top 30, and .NET ranks in the top 10, in fact, which you can see how .NET is famous amongst developers. Speaking of GitHub, C# is in the top 5 languages as an indicator of how open source ecosystem is embracing C# and .NET as a language for building things. And there is a huge work on performance of ASP.NET Core, which ranks #1 in those benchmarks evaluated by different community members. Lastly, most of the audience today, we continue to, like most of the audience today in this call who are fan of .NET, we continue to see a large part of new users downloading the .NET identified as students, right? So 40% of usage or the people who are downloading this particular survey are the students. So you can see how students are embracing .NET as a platform to build their final year projects, and there are things that they are building for for the community as well. So these are some of the facts that you can leverage how .NET is embracing the developers and the whole ecosystem to build things on .NET. And .NET user base keeps growing. Let's talk about some numbers which you need to be aware of. There are over 5 million monthly active .NET developers who are using Visual Studio and then also Visual Studio Code. And then if you are a Mac fan, you can use Visual Studio Code for Mac. We also Visual Studio for Mac. As I mentioned, Microsoft has seen a significant growth in the .NET Core ecosystem. Our open source support and also the cross-platform support for .NET, and it has cost 2 million active developers per month, which is a tremendous growth on compared to what we have for .NET Core 3.1. Also to highlight, there is a significant number of Windows developers, which is 200,000, right? Move to .NET Core from .NET Framework, and the team is expecting to accelerate when the .NET 5 is, as the .NET 5 is announced. So you can see a tremendous growth in the space of Windows desktop developers moving to .NET Core. And then right now they were starting with .NET 5. Also, it's super exciting that the number of first-time developers who we are seeing to use the .NET, right, which is around 230,000 in September alone, which as per the latest figures. And there is around 2 million deployments per month to Linux from Visual Studio. So if you say Microsoft is not an open source company, you can assume that the number of Linux VM deployments as of today is 3 times the number of Windows VMs on Azure. So you can see it's supporting more number of Linux VMs as per in production, which is running the .NET applications. So if you still say Microsoft is not an open source company, you need to analyze these facts that I have provided. I would like to highlight some of the performance improvements that were announced in .NET 5 announcements. Take a look at some of the details that I have provided here, how .NET team is continuing the investments in terms of performance all the way up and down, the stack, right? So team has improved .NET 5 by 30% of socket performance on Linux over .NET Core 3.1, and also if you consider JSON serialization performance, which has improved 19% over .NET Core 3.1. And also if you are Go fan, if you are a C++ fan, the GPRC server performance exceeds Go as measured by the community benchmark. So these are some of the performance improvement you can go ahead and explore in this particular wiki page, where they have listed all the performance improvements that they worked in the announcements. As you know, there are millions of Windows desktop application developers. Fikri should be one of them out there writing many years ago, right? There are still business critical applications which are being utilized or running on Windows desktop. So .NET team want to make sure that these applications not only run on the .NET, but also can be deployed with the latest version of Visual Studio. That's why we have, the .NET team has worked on workloads to .NET Core, and those are supported in .NET 5 as well. And also over 200,000 Windows developers, as I mentioned, moved from .NET Framework to .NET Core. With the .NET 5, team is bringing the full support of Visual Studio development experience to you, including the third-party control, as I mentioned, with the click one installer support, so that you can deploy the applications to your customers. By moving forward, these applications can get in the benefits of .NET 5, which is like self-containerization, like a single file exe, that so that you can simply deploy on any environment. You decide when you want to update. You can choose the underlying platform. With a single command, you would be able to update your application. These are some of the amazing things that you can go ahead and explore around the Windows desktop apps on .NET 5. And if you are a native mobile native developer, or if you are a fan of Xamarin Forms 5 is coming. Will be coming out later this year with tons of features like new API for brushes, shapes, and paths, which lets you to create beautiful custom cross-platforms UIs for Androids, iOS, and Windows. There is a better support for XAML experience, which provides the intelligent supports for data binding, and then you can diagnostics features in real time, and hot reload features, which are rebuilt from the ground up, so that you can use the same stack for if you're building WPF applications or Windows Universal Platform applications with a consistent experience, no matter what you are developing, right? You can get started building cross-platform applications with Xamarin with just an iPhone, or if you're using laptop, you can start as of now. And also, if you're a Visual Studio fan, not only these, right, this announcement that I showed off. If you're a Visual Studio fan, there were some cool announcements announced around Visual Studio, which you can go ahead and explore. If I have to highlight in terms of productivity, Roslyn analysis, which are included in the .NET 5 SDK, which you can leverage, and also intelligence completion capabilities for date time, and also time span is supported on Visual Studio. And then you can pass inline parameters with the name hints, which is also supported. With the intelligence team completions, you can train a custom model on your C# code base, and get started with contextual completions suggested for your own types. And then you are provided with new Git experience. If you are deploying applications using GitHub Actions, you can quickly access your Git shortcuts with the Git menu, and then you can easily expand things, commit your code, and then with a single click, you will be able to deploy your solutions to any environment. And then Linux debugging is another feature which is supported with the announcement. So you can debug Linux, Linux application directly within the Visual Studio, and then .NET Core debugging on WSL2, which is also supported with the Visual Studio. And then XAML experience, as I mentioned, if you are building mobile applications, there are diagnostic improvements which are supported, and also you can have the hot reload in real time, so that you will be able to debug in real time. And then GitHub Actions preview is supported on Visual Studio, so that you can generate the GitHub Actions workflow in order to deploy your solutions to Azure or any other environment which is written on ASP.NET or .NET 5. And then if I have to talk about a full stack .NET web apps with the Blazor, I think one of the favorite announcements which I wanted to highlight, I think was the Blazor WebAssembly, which was announced during the build this year. With the .NET 5 includes support for building full stack .NET web application. You can have Blazor WebAssembly in order to build web application which use the which use the core framework libraries from .NET 5, giving the access to entire .NET API under the hood, right? So there is runtime performance in Blazor WebAssembly, which is 2 or 3 times faster than the previous release. So with the Blazor WebAssembly, you can create your web applications easily, and then it now supports server-side pre-rendering in order to make your applications load faster and enable the users to access quickly, right? With lots of app dependencies, and if you heard about lazy loading, which is supported with Blazor assembly. And then other new features include support for component virtualization, CSS isolation, JavaScript isolation, capturing the JavaScript object references and the components that you build. You would be able to, easily create the components with the, integrated third-party controls, so that you can build your application with C# instead of JavaScript. So these are some of the cool announcements with .NET 5 around Blazor WebAssembly, which you can explore if you're building, web applications. In terms of cloud-native applications, which I will be covering in detail in this session, there were a lot of announcements made this year from Ignite and also from the build and also from .NET Conf. One of my favorite announcements from this year was the support for building microservices applications with .NET, and you could simply build, test, and deploy with a single command from your console using the project type, which I will be showing a demo, right? And the enablement of WSL to deploy to test applications across different environments with the GPU support, which is enabling the developers to have high accelerated environments in order to, say, if you are deploying machine learning algorithm, if you are deploying some, if you want to run TensorFlow in a particular environment, and if you want to access that, you can use WSL2 in order to access those environments, right? If you want to build any workloads using AI technology or machine learning models, you can certainly go ahead and leverage WSL. And the other thing is around the project type, which I will be covering in the coming slides. And the ASP.NET and Azure App Service teams have closely worked together throughout the .NET 5 timeline and made sure that ASP.NET developers have access to the latest bits of the .NET 5 runtime from the announcement itself, right? So if you are building applications using .NET 5, you have the flexibility to deploy on app service immediately. This means that as soon as you download .NET 5 and get started building apps with it, you can deploy the .NET 5 applications to app service using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, and you will have the full support of deploying .NET 5 applications to Azure App Service using GitHub Actions. So if you're leveraging Azure DevOps, you can just deploy with a single click. This means that there is no more wait for platform developers to support the runtime. You can simply, the announcement was made that whenever there is a new release, it has the support for app service on Azure. So you can immediately start building your applications with the latest framework and then start deploying. So let me dive into the topic for today, which is around cloud native. Let me check the time. So let me ask the questions to audience, right? What exactly is cloud native? If you know the answer, just type it in the Q&A window. I know most of you are attending this event in live, but if you feel free to write the answer in the chat window, which I will be exploring after this session. Now let's talk more about cloud native, right? If you ask me, there is no exact definition for cloud native, but if you want a detailed definition, you can go ahead and check Cloud Native Foundation website, which lists certain definitions for what is cloud native. If I have to give an example, I mean, within short time, cloud native has become a technology which is trending in the software industry, right? It's a new way to think about how to build complex systems, which is widely popular among the open source communities. So for an application to be termed as cloud native, it has to be built in such a way that it can operate on any cloud, which is a public or private or hybrid environment, using the methods specific to cloud. So starting from, when you talk about cloud native, it includes certain aspects, right? Starting from building APIs, which denotes exposing the services as a lightweight components for easy integration. So if you're building software, you might have to expose some APIs to end customers and also for fellow developers in order to start integrating them. And then second is about packaging your application as containers, which is an architectural approach to developing an application as a collection of modular, loosely coupled services. It's about building microservices which explain the architecture of having chunks of modules separating the logic, right? And finally, the agility. So if you are a developer, if you are working in an organization, it's all about how fast you are deploying things to the end customer, right? So with DevOps, which is about people, process, and technology, that promotes collaborative way to build and deploy things quickly to cloud. As you can see in this slide, by 2020, I think we are end of 2020, 35% of the production applications will be cloud native. I think this is absolutely true. If you have seen the recent, KubeConf, you can see that 60 million developers are deploying their, choosing their backend as Kubernetes to deploy, their workloads on different cloud. So there are many reasons to adopt to cloud native technologies, right? Cloud native offers the benefits such as speed, reliability, security for the applications. And some of the scenarios that you would consider cloud native as a way to host your application is that first is around modernization of the business critical applications. Say if you are running monolithic applications in your existing environment, and if you want to take them to cloud, you can consider cloud native as a way to deploy your application. And the second is delivery of the SaaS solution. Say if you are having customers across distributed across the world, and if you want to make your solution as a SaaS solution, you could consider cloud native as option. And then third is around building real-time application, which talks about connecting telemetries from cars, devices, in order to have the IoT integrated. Then you can have cloud native as option. And the fourth is around applications serving geographically distributed users. So if you have users coming from different parts of the world, and if you want to serve them in a better way, you can leverage cloud native as option to provide services to your end customers. So when I talk about cloud native, there are three components which I know of. Providing the benefits to your customers, right? The first one is containers. I hope most of you are familiar with what is container. It's a lightweight standalone executable package or a piece of software that includes everything that needs to run your application. So which includes code, runtime, system tools, and system libraries and settings. So it provides a way to virtualize the underlying operating system and also to run your application independently. So once you there is a famous quote, right? It works on my machine. So if it works on your machine, it has to work across different environment if you are containerizing it. Since the announcement of .NET back in since the announcement of Docker back in 2010, most of the organization and developers adopted containers in a large manner, right? It offers a way to package your application and run it portably across different environments in a consistent way, which provides a unified way to run your application. Second is around serverless. I think one of my favorite topics these days, and I would like to, my focused area is on serverless, which offers a way to scale your application where you don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure, which provides a lot of business value, right? I mean, if the developers want to build something quickly, you can get the real benefit of running your applications using serverless technologies, and then you pay for what you use. So these are some of the things that serverless provides for the end customers, as well as if you're building software applications with .NET. And final one is around the Kubernetes, which is a platform to manage and scale applications which are made of containers. It acts as an orchestrator to run your workloads in the way you need. I mean, one of the if you see on Azure Kubernetes service is the largest growing service on Azure, right? You can see that most of the Fortune 500 companies, I think 95% of them are with Microsoft Azure. They are leveraging Kubernetes as a way to orchestrate their complex applications, and they are deploying on Azure. And then if I have to talk about what is cloud native and what are its benefits, large companies, as I talked about, most of the Fortune 500 companies are embracing the cloud native technologies, which provides, I think if I have to talk about Amazon, right? I mean, I'm talking about the um, website where you order things, not the Amazon cloud, which is having 120 plus services to generate a single page where you order things and then you can see the recommendations. But if you see behind the scenes, they are using nearly 120 services, and they makes a production change in a within, I mean, every 11.6 seconds. So you can see the agility, how fast they are deploying things quicker to the end users, right? And then if I have to talk about Netflix, I think I'm also using Netflix, but if you guys are using Netflix and watching the video, you need to understand how the things works at the back end, right? They have 600 plus services running in production, which is deployed, I mean, 100 times a day. You can see how fast they are deploying things, making it to production. And then if I have to talk about one of my favorite transport service, Uber, which has 1,000 plus services stored on 8,000 Git repositories, deploys every minute, right, during the work hours. So all these things talks about how you can move faster, how you can provide the agility in order to deploy things quicker to your end customer. So cloud native technologies provides accelerated innovation. So if you see most of the startups who have succeeded, they are leveraging cloud native Azure option to deploy their solution. And then rapid releases, which I talked about, how Uber is using and how Netflix is deploying their software. And then you can see the increase of confidence. So when you get the confidence of releasing things quickly to production, you don't have to worry about deploying things on Friday. I have seen memes in Twitter and different mediums talking about deployment on Friday, but if you have the automation DevOps in place, you don't have to worry about deploying things. So if you really want to deep dive into cloud native capabilities, these are the 6 things that it basically revolves around, right? So I mean, one is the cloud, where you natively design application, and it has to talk about modern designing. If you are choosing microservices as a way to deploy your applications, you can have that. And then containers to package or containerize your applications with all the dependencies included. And the backing services is one of the important factor that you need to consider in order to run your application, which I will be talking about. And finally, the automation. I don't know how many of you are having the automation when you're talking about deployment of the application, but automation is the key factor when you're talking about cloud native applications. So these are the 6 capabilities that is powered by cloud native, right? And if you have to talk about, when you think of key attributes of cloud native applications, they are usually packaged as a lightweight containers. So cloud native applications as a collection of independent and autonomous services that are packaged as lightweight containers, so that you can leverage any of the existing container orchestration mechanism, and it provides a distributed architecture, right? And then these cloud native applications are developed with the best of breed languages and frameworks. So if you don't have to worry about being a .NET developer, you don't have to worry about being a Golang developer. You can leverage whatever the skills that you possess in order to build independent microservices using your favorite language and framework, right? So cloud native applications are polyglot. So services uses different services and runtimes and frameworks, so the developers could use their own skills or own stack which they are familiar in order to build microservices. And then it is usually designed as loosely coupled patterns, so that you don't have to worry about how you are going to deploy each of those services. So you have the flexibility to deploy each of the microservices independently, so you don't have to worry about what would be the dependencies that would be affecting your software when you deploy, right? And then automated capability is one of the key features. So cloud native applications are highly automated. You can make use of infrastructure as a code, and then which provides a certain level of confidence to your automation engineers and for developers to deploy things faster to the market. And then you can leverage pay as you go, which I talked about, how serverless is offering a way to have your applications deployed in the pay as you go model. If you are new to cloud native, this is an amazing book which you can go ahead and explore. The 12-factor app methodology is suggested by developers for smoothly working and delivering software SaaS applications, right? You can think about building applications for which are considered to be web applications with microservices. So there are 12 factors, starting from how you design your code base, and how you start monitoring your applications at the customer end, how you can leverage monitoring capabilities in order to get the telemetry is coming from your customer environment, so that you will be able to fix the things quickly as possible. I would highly recommend you to go and explore this particular book after this session. Let me move ahead. Something happened. Yeah. So when you think about cloud native applications, those are deployed using containers, right? So containers are the method of operating system virtualization that allows you to run your application and its dependencies in an isolated way, right? And containers is an isolated and secure application platform that holds everything that you want to run your application. So it uses something called namespaces, so you can provide isolation or separate them using tagging. If you have seen the biggest containers in the world, they have leveraged the method of tagging, and then you can have the control of deploying using the controller group. So with the containers, developers will be able to build features in QuickTime in an agile manner, which gives a head start in development. By using the ready-made available boiler template. So if you are starting with .NET, you can containerize by referring the base image from the Microsoft SDK that is provided for building .NET applications. And then applications can be shipped and run in production environment exactly in the same way that works in your development machine or any other environment, right? So you don't have to worry about it worked on my machine, and you don't have to fight with QAs in order to prove that the features that you developed are working. So containers also offers a portability of horizontal scaling. So whenever there is a demand or increase in customers, you can make use of the horizontal scaling options, which provides identical containers in order to scale your applications based on demand, right? When you think of cloud native component, there are a lot of moving services included, right? So which I talked about as backing services. If you think about a mission critical application, say something like eBay, it involves a lot of moving components, right? Where you need to think about authentication, where you need to think about monitoring, where you need to think about queuing the request that is coming from different users. So if you talk about Black Friday, there are millions of requests that are coming from your end customers at a particular point of time, right? Then you need to have something like queuing in order to handle all the requests that are being retrieved from your application. So the the dependent services that are tightly coupled with your application are termed to be as the backing services. So cloud native apps consumed, some of the managed backing services, especially in Azure. You can see some of the backing services starting with application insights for monitoring, and then you can store some of your files in blob storage, which is considered as a backing service. And if you're storing any of the NoSQL data using Cosmos DB, then that is also considered as a backing service. And if you're providing identity as a platform using Azure Active Directory, that is also backing service. And then you could think of Redis Cache, which is a managed service on Azure. So that is also backing service. So you could think of different services which are provided by the platform in order to support your application running without any faults and things like that. So these are some of the backing services that you need to consider whenever you are deploying your applications using microservices or by making them containerized, right? So if I have to talk about the final point, which I talked about DevOps, how often do you deploy the features to production? I know I have asked this question to many of the clients that I'm working with. They used to say 1 month or 2 weeks, right? if you are a true programmer, you should be in a position to deploy whenever a customer make a request, right? Even in the next minute, you should be able to deploy your application. If you're having the right practices like DevOps and automation, you should be in a position to deploy in quick time based on the customer request. If you look at GitHub, team is constantly deploying dozens of features every day, right? You can see there are features that they have released in the past. Even in the GitHub Universe as an announcement, you could see how fast they are deploying the features each day by day, right? When you think of automation, it covers automating your application or the code as an infrastructure. So the deployment of the code and provisioning the environment where you want to run your application on. And then you can talk about if you have any set of gates for approval, like pre-deployment, it needs to be passed through the approvals, right? So you can't just deploy whatever you have in test environment. You need to go through the right approval process. And then the deployment happens according to the configured environment. And finally, if there is any post-deployment conditions that needs to be enabled and approved. I have seen most of the, partners who have deployed and then they revert once they identify any issues in production. So you need to follow something like blue-green deployment or canary deployment in order to route the users whenever you are deploying something. And if you feel that you need to route the users to the new features, then you need to route certain percentage of the users to the new deployment that you have done. So these are some of the ways that you need to consider when you're deploying mission critical application with automation. So when I talk about automation, if you are familiar with providing infrastructure as a code, Azure Resource Manager templates lets you to have the infrastructure defined in code so that you can spin up new environments with the default configurations with the default resources that you want to deploy. It offers a declarative way to design the infrastructure where you want to have the blueprint of the resources that you want to deploy, right? And then Terraform is a classic example if you want to deploy across multiple environments. So there are a lot of open source developers using Terraform as a deployment way to deploy things quicker to cloud. With the recent announcement from Ignite, you can leverage Project Bicep, which is a domain-specific language for deploying Azure resources in a declarative way, which is again provided or supported by the Microsoft team, which you can go ahead and explore, which is called as a Project Bicep. I talked about a lot of things, and finally, I wanted to talk about how to, have the continuous delivery in place if you are delivering through the automated deployment. So Azure DevOps, as you know, is a shared is a service shared with both our internal teams and our customers, which provides a way to have Azure boards, Azure repos, Azure pipelines, and then Azure artifacts starting from system design to end-to-end monitoring. You can have all the things in one place. So Azure Pipelines is the DevOps offering, which is providing the continuous integration and deployment, and also you can leverage things like Azure repos, Azure pipeline, Azure boards in order to manage how you are structuring the project with your development team. It's a great tool that you can leverage in order to automate things that you are deploying on any environment, right? I talked about different capabilities of cloud native, and I would like to touch upon one of the collaboration that happened in 2018, which is the acquisition of GitHub. So GitHub is the premier developer collaboration platform from Microsoft. It's a home for most of the open source developers, right? I'm a true GitHub fan, and if you are really a fan of GitHub, you can see the innovations happening in the space of GitHub, right? There are 50 million developers across the world who are using GitHub on a daily basis. One of the features that I wanted to highlight is the GitHub Actions. So if you are a .NET developer, go ahead and explore GitHub Actions in order to deploy your solutions to cloud. And if you're thinking about mission critical applications, you need to think about orchestrating the entire operation. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with how Netflix works. If you have seen how it works at the back end, they are deploying, it's a service that streams 250 million hours of videos per day, right? And there are around 98 million paying subscribers in 190 countries who are actively using Netflix. If you go through the article that they publish, you can understand hundreds of microservices on how they orchestrate those microservices behind the scenes. So they're having thousands of microservices, thousands of deployments, production changes, and 10,000s of customer interactions per minute. These are orchestrated using some kind of orchestration. So if you think about these kind of operations or mission critical application, there you need a certain way to deploy your applications, right? That's where Kubernetes comes into play. So there are many orchestrators that you can use to deploy your microservices. Orchestrators make your microservices. Make your microservices to scale, to communicate, and perform well, right? Kubernetes is one of the most open sourced, most popular, which is available on Azure as well as a managed Kubernetes service, which is called the AKS, where you don't need to worry about setting up the communication across different applications that you're running on. And then AKS automatically take care of monitoring, scaling, and managing your containers, right? So manage Kubernetes on Azure help with actions like, hosting. If you want to do some patching on the underlying OS, you can do that. And then scaling, whenever there is a demand, it does the automatic scaling. So Azure Kubernetes Service, it does the automated upgrades and patches, provides high availability to the end users so that you can run your applications without any downtime, right? When it comes to self-healing, whenever a pod goes down, it has the automated way to recover and run your applications without the end customer knows, right? So AKS is simplifying the deployment management with the operation supported with Azure DevOps so that you can deploy from your development environment to a cloud with a single click. And also there are tools, if you have seen the recent Ignite, there are tools such as, Azure Dev Spaces, which is recently announced as with a new name, so that you can leverage Bridge to Kubernetes, which was announced as Bridge to Kubernetes, in order to deploy microservices which you don't have to connect to the cloud environment. You can just build your microservices on your local machine with your Visual Studio Code. You can connect with your cloud environment where the other microservices are running on, right? You will be able to debug the cloud environment from your local machine by leveraging the Bridge to Kubernetes, which was earlier known as Dev Spaces, which will be deprecating by 2023. That is one of the announcements that came in from Ignite. And I talked about containers, I talked about Kubernetes, I talked about how to orchestrate using Kubernetes. So one of the scenarios that Kubernetes is considered in order to deploy applications is the microservice application. So microservice can be considered as a set of independent service. Each targets a separate business capability, right? Each is encapsulated or built as independent, domain specific with the state, so that each owns their own data, right? So you can have different databases for each of the microservices depending on the scenarios, and then each runs in an isolated process through the exposed API interface. So developers can focus on the particular service that they're working on, and then you can leverage any of the framework that you want to run your application on. So .NET Core was built for the cloud and is well suited for this type of deployment. And if I have to talk about microservice architecture, which I will be covering in the demo, this is a simple architecture of how microservice architecture would look like, where you have the front end running on any devices, and then you will have the API gateway where your request will be received, and then that will be routed to underlying hosted environment where you will have each of the microservices as shown here. And then those will be talking to different databases based on your requirement, which might talk to a single database as well. And then you need to have a queuing mechanism. In this case, we are leveraging Event Bus in order to have the messaging across different microservices. So there you need to access some of the common data. Then you can use Event Hub or Azure Service Bus, which provides a way to communicate across different environments. Let's go ahead and see how you could deploy a cloud native application with the recent announcement that came from .NET Conf, which is the project tie. This is a demo, first demo that I wanted to leverage. And if you are new to Azure, you can leverage this particular feature in order to deploy your applications to cloud, right? The first demo is more for beginners who want to deploy applications to cloud. Let me show how you can easily deploy. I think I have 10 more minutes, but I will take 5 more extra minutes to show the project demo as well. So this is how the end-to-end deployment would look like on Azure Kubernetes Service, right? So you have the developers working on the environment, and then they will be able to push their code to the source control, which is shown in the Azure DevOps. And then once you build the image locally, you will be able to define the pipeline using Azure DevOps, and then those images will be pushed to container registry, which is I think you can leverage Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry in order to push your images. Once you push those images, those will be taken care by the Azure pipelines in order to deploy on this environment, which is the Azure Kubernetes Service. And then you can connect to any of the backends. In this case, I have used SQL, right? So let me go ahead and explore. I mean, this is for beginners, but if you are expert, you might be already familiar with. If I go to the Azure portal, you can see my dashboard. Let me go ahead and, I created a simple resource group in order to deploy this solution. So let me, this is the resource group. If I go to add a service, you can search for something called DevOps, starter, which is a service provided for beginners. I think I have a slow internet, so this is a service that is provided for beginners who are starting on Azure. You can explore how you can deploy any kind of application with the templates that is provided on Azure, right? So I will not be going in detail on what are the things that you can leverage, but if you're a Golang fan, if you're a Ruby fan, you can choose the underlying platform. In this case, I will choose .NET as my application, and then you can see different frameworks that is behind the hood, right? So you can see ASP.NET Core. If you want to build a simple IoT application, you can do that. Let me go ahead and choose ASP.NET Core. If you want to add a database, you can do that. And then these are the underlying services that is supported on Azure, where you want to deploy the application. So you can start with Kubernetes and then Service Fabric, Windows Web App, or virtual machines. So these, and if you want to deploy using serverless as option, you can leverage functions. So in this case, I will choose Kubernetes as a way to deploy my application, and then you need to pass the project name, right? I'm not going to deploy this application, but I wanted to showcase how you can simply, leverage this in order to deploy your applications if you are a beginner on Azure, also on .NET. So if you don't know how to automate things, this is a great place to start deploying your application. Again, these are some of the additional settings that you need to provide. You need to provide the resource group and also container registry where you want to push the images to. So you can create the container registry and then deploy, right? And once you click on OK, I have already deployed this application. So you will be able to see a one place where you have end-to-end, insights on what is the project homepage, what are the repositories, what are the pipelines and things like that. You can see the application is already deployed and running. Once you click on deploy, I have already deployed this application, which has the CI/CD in place. And if I navigate to the CI/CD, you can see how it has automated the CI/CD pipeline using different steps. So if you are a .NET developer, I mean, this process takes much time, right? If you're building mission critical application, you might have to spend at least 1 week to build the thing, starting from building the pipeline, building the environment, building the resources. So it might be overwhelming for a new developer to get started with something like this, but you can leverage Azure DevOps Starter if you are a beginner. But again, if you think of any production applications, you can't really use this Azure DevOps Starter because it's something like a template, right? So you need to go ahead and modify different things such as steps here. So one of the things that was announced in the .NET 5, .NET Conf is that project type, where you don't have to, do all these steps. Like you don't have to build the a Docker file in order to containerize your image, and then you don't have to build a certain pipelines in order to deploy your solutions to Azure Kubernetes Service. I will be showing that in the second demo. I hope you understood how you can spin up a simple application using .NET and then deploy to Azure Kubernetes Service if you are new to .NET. But if you are building a .NET mission critical application, let me go ahead and show how you can use Project Thai as an example in order to build this particular .NET with the latest announcement from the .NET 5, right? So Project Thai is all about making easy and faster to build, debug microservice application. I think service discovery is one of the things that you need to consider as a developer, which I talked about, having Swagger as a endpoint in order to document your API, which is automated using Project Thai, and it also add dependencies, so you don't have to create Docker file from the scratch. With a single command, you can just deploy your application, and then you can have the dashboards in order to see how your application is performing. You can Dockerize and deploy your applications with AKS. This amazing tool provides a way to standardize way of deploying or describing your API using the Open API standards, and then you will dynamically test your applications in your local machine so that you don't have to worry about how it would look like when you deploy on AKS. Let me go ahead. These are the features that I talk about. Let me go ahead and show the deployment, right? I may take extra 5 minutes, but these are the prerequisites that you need. I have attached the source code here, which you can go ahead and explore. So you need VS Code and then latest .NET SDK and then .NET Docker Desktop in order to containerize your application, and then Azure subscription in order to deploy your applications on Azure Kubernetes Service. Let me go ahead and show. I might not have enough time, but let me explain. So you need to have Windows Terminal, but you can leverage Visual Studio Code as well. So let me go ahead and create the .NET application, right? So in order to create the application, you need to have the Project Thai. So you can just install Project Thai with this particular command, .NET tool install, and then Microsoft Project Thai. It's in pre-release mode. I think they will be releasing in the end of Q3 next year, Q3 in the sense by end of March. So you can, which will be generally available,
Saji,
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, extra 5 minutes will be okay. We can just finish the demo. So it's
Sure.
important to see the demos. Yeah, don't worry about it.
All right.
We can give
Thanks.
you extra 5 minutes.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and create the .NET applications, right? So I'm going to create with the latest. Okay, it already exists. So you need to create a directory. I think I have already created for demo purpose, but you can create a new directory, and then once I navigate to this folder, you can see that okay, I already have this, right? So I will just execute those commands so that you will be able to see what it does. It will create a .NET I'm creating a folder called .NET conf app, and then I'm going to create the front-end application. So I'm going to create two applications, right? One is the front-end application, and the other one is the back-end application, which is the API to communicate and get some details for the front-end applications to visualize, right? So let me go ahead and create the front-end application. So .NET new, which is a Razor application, and then you need to pass a namespace as front end. So it is going to create the project template, as you can see. So once it's got created, I will just execute this application using this particular command, which is the Thai run front end. So you can mention the front end application and see how this looks like on Project Thai, and how you can access your application using the dashboard that is provided using the Project Thai. So let me access this in my localhost, which is available in localhost 8080. It should work. Oh. So, okay, this is available in this particular port. Yeah, you can see the application running, right? So you can see the front end, and if you want to access the logs, how it's running, if you, I mean, if you run this particular .NET run in your local console, you would be able to see the logs, but you can access from the dashboard as well. And then if I access this particular front end, you would be able to see the metrics like what are the dependencies and what is the value that is allocated, so that you will be able to access, right? And then I will go ahead and build the backend application, which is a .NET Core application. So you can create the backend using a particular command, .NET new web API, and then name it as backend, right? So it is going to create the backend API. So you can see that it is already created. So you can see there are two applications. The third step is to, and if I refresh this, I think I need to run this again. So let me run .NET run backend so that you will be able to see. Okay. Okay, it should be, I'm confusing myself, Thai run backend. Not the .NET run, it should be Thai run, because we are using Thai as the way to, run your application. So again, if I go here, you can see both running. So you can see the backend is also running, right? So as a .NET developer, you need to build a bridge between those two, right, in order to access the full end feature. So let me go ahead and you can build this particular application offline as well. So I have already built this. This is the backend API and this is the front end API, and then you need to connect these two, right? So you can add the dependencies to the backend API with this particular command using .NET solution add, and then what is the front end and back end. This is already I have added, so I don't have to. Solution file doesn't exist. Okay. .NET new, .NET solution, add front end, and then if you want to add backend, you can do that. Let me see. .NET conf.
I think you have to give the actual project file inside the front end folder to add the solution.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Let me. Yeah. Thanks, Vicky. That's the truth about being a full .NET developer, right? Thanks for helping. I think since I'm wasting time, let me explain the concepts, right? So once you add this, you will be able to, add the dependencies to your front end application. So I have the backend, I have the front end, and then there is a solution, right? Once you do that, what we need to do is that, it's a web API where you can see the weather forecast, where there's a controller which, provide these details with the date and time, right? So I need to consume this web API, so that I will go ahead and create a simple class, same as what you have in, backend, so that you can bind the, data to your front end, and then you need to also create a client in order to access your, the API in your front end. So this is a simple get async method where you can consume your API from the backend, and then you can bind your data on the front end page, which is available in the pages, which you could be able to see. Here I'm calling the forecast, and then you calling the get weather async method in order to bind, right? And then if you go to the index HTML, where you can see how I'm doing a for each and then deploying the web application. So right now I have the front end and the back end. So the front end is talking to the back end and getting those details. The next step is to containerize your application, right? So with the project type, you can simply containerize your application by running a single command, which is called the Thai run, and then you need to provide Docker. So what it does is, okay, the issue that I got earlier was the project name is .NET Confab, so that's the reason, right? So what it does is it is going to containerize the front-end application It is going to containerize the backend application using Docker. You don't have to write the Docker file from scratch. So it will automatically build the dependencies with the Docker file. It will also make sure that communication is existing across both front end and back end, so that you can see it is executing those commands, right? So if I go back to my dashboard, you would be able to see something new. Earlier it was showing the front end and back end, but right now you would be able to see something new. Let me show. Hope it works. Yeah, you can see the type as containers, right? So right now the application is containerized, and if you need to access the backend, again, you can go here, but if you want to access the endpoint, you can see that I need to pass the controller name. So you can see the API is fetching the details. Right now, the solution is containerized using Docker, right? So with Projecti, with a single command, you don't have to write a long Docker file in order to containerize, add the dependencies, and then copy the files. With Projecti, it makes a easier way to containerize your application with Docker. Let me stop this and let me show how you can deploy this application to AKS, right? So that in order to do that, you need to create a cluster. So I have already created a cluster on Azure, which you could see from here. Let me open the Azure portal, which I have already created a .NET Conf AKS cluster, which comprises of 3 nodes, which is a specific VM, right? So I have used the DS2 V2 as the underlying VM, and it consists of 3 nodes. I don't necessarily need 3 nodes, but that is the default option that is provided on AKS. I was lazy to configure, with single node, but you can leverage single node to deploy your application as well. If you go to node pools, you can see that node count, right? And one of the features that we announced from AKS is that I would like to highlight the features. You don't have to install the AKS dashboard. You would be able to access your namespace, your pods directly from the Azure portal. So this is one of the latest feature that is supported on AKS as well. So you would be able to access your namespace and whatever the workloads that you're running on AKS directly from the Azure portal. So if you are deploying on applications on Kubernetes, that's a way to explore, right? Let me go ahead and Dockerize this application and then deploy to AKS. One of the things that you need to do is that you need to authenticate with your AKS cluster. So this is a command to authenticate, right? So you need to pass the resource group and whatever the namespace for your AKS cluster. So right now I'm authenticate with AKS cluster in order to deploy my application to AKS cluster. So it might take a couple of seconds unless my internet. Yeah, you can see that the .NET Conf cluster is merged with my current context. So I will be able to, deploy my application. So if you are deploying to AKS, I know how hard it is to create the package, how hard it is to create the YAML files with each of those, configuration like a service endpoint. If you are talking to different applications using ingress controller, you need to define those endpoints, right? But with Projecti, what it does is it does all those things automated, right? So you just need to run this command called tie deploy and then interactive. So you would be able to see what are the things happening at the backend if you make this command interactive, but you can leverage tie deploy as well in order to deploy your applications to AKS. So what it does is it is going to load the containers that I have already containerized using Docker, and then it is going to deploy to the AKS cluster that I have created. So it might ask few questions on what is the container registry where you want to push your images, where you need to pass Docker container registry or Azure container registry if you are leveraging Azure container registry. So it might take few seconds, but let me wait, right? Let me go back to slides and explain some of the things that I wanted to highlight until it authenticate with my Azure container registry. So few of the things that I wanted to highlight, right? So if you are new to Azure, I think there is no other cloud vendor who is supporting .NET as the first supported or platform to run your application. There are hundreds of developers or services which are hundreds of services which are available for .NET developers, which are fully managed on Azure, which we are providing as a way to build things, and also you can build things around AI, build things around machine learning, which you can leverage these services in order to deploy your applications and make it cloud native, right? So .NET developer, developers are the primary targeted customers if you are leveraging Azure as a platform. And then these are some of the recommendations for running your .NET applications. As you look to modernize the .NET Core applications with microservices or event-driven architecture, there are more options and recommendations which is available on Azure. Today I demonstrated Azure Kubernetes Service, but you can leverage VMs. If you're a developer, I would not recommend leveraging VMs. It's all way of deployment, right? If you want to modernize your applications, these are some of the application services that you would consider. So Azure Container Instances is one of the service that we provide in order to run individual containers with no VM management. So you can consider Azure Container Instances for running, short running operations. So if you want to spin up some labs for your developers, or if you want to run some pre-configured environment for your developers, you can use Azure Container Instances. And then Azure Web App, which provides a scalable way to deploy your applications using containers, you can leverage. And then Azure Kubernetes Service, I talked about it. And then Azure Batch, if you are providing any backend jobs or scalable large batch jobs that you want to run for your end customers. So these are some of the services. If you're beginner on Azure on .NET, you can explore these services. I will quickly talk about the .NET architecture. So this is a one-stop shop available for .NET developers, where you can leverage some of the capabilities that you can build with .NET and Azure, and they are providing some of the samples that you can leverage to build your applications using .NET and Azure, right? And this is a great ebook that is available, Cloud Architecting Cloud Native Applications for .NET applications on Azure, which you can download from this URL and then start building your applications. I would like to talk about some of the customer scenarios, but I would highlight one of the customer scenarios, which is a favorite among developers. I think you can see how these Fortune 500 companies are leveraging .NET and Azure as a platform to build and deploy applications, right? So if you have to talk about one of the important scenario, I think programmers love this particular side, right? Stack Overflow is an amazing example of how they are leveraging cloud native applications features and also using .NET in order to convert their monolithic application using microservice architecture, and how they are building features in order to support developers. You can watch out this talk by Prashant Santrasegar, who is the CEO of .NET, CEO of Stack Overflow, in order to see how they have leveraged .NET, right? I would like to end my presentation with this particular announcement. You can see there is a commitment that going forward, each release will have a major version of .NET every November, right? This is a huge boost for .NET developers. Earlier, we used to have different timelines, but going forward, each November, you will have a new release coming. So there is a predictable release, which helps everyone, right? If you have to summarize the whole session in one sentence, one framework for all, which is ruling all the developers, right? So you can start leveraging. And let me go back to demo and see if I have connected to container registry. Yes, I need to provide the container registry. In this case, I'm leveraging the Docker Hub as my container registry. Again, this is going to deploy the application which I have built with front end and the back end. So it is going to push the images and then deploy on top of Kubernetes, right? So you can see that it has created a Docker image and then push the container registry. Since I have already pushed these images, but with this limited internet connection these days, it might take extra time, but I have already pushed these images so that you can see both front end and the back end image, which is built on using Docker, which is containerized. And if you're a Visual Studio Code fan, you can leverage Docker extension and also Kubernetes extension in order to visualize how your deployment look like. So you can see that my application, you can see both application is containerized, Sajid run backend, Sajid run frontend. And if I go back to Docker Hub, you would be able to see my Docker Hub consists of both front-end and back-end application. Let me open up quickly. My internet is too slow, right? I'm using dialog, by the way. if you want to know. Yeah, so that you can see both backend and front-end application is Dockerized and then pushed to Docker Hub, right? So let me go ahead and see whether it has been deployed to Kubernetes cluster. So I have already connected to Kubernetes environment from my local environment. If you are new to Kubernetes, you can manage your Azure environment from Visual Studio Code itself, where you would be able to access what are the namespaces, what are the deployments, and what are the pods running. So if I go to network, if I go to workloads where you can see the pods running as of now. So there should be two pods running. One is for the front end and one is for the back end. You can see the application, right? So it is running and you can see that it's in green. If there are any issues, you would be able to identify there would be a red symbol. And if I go and explore how the endpoint looks like, you can just run a simple command, get pods, which would be able to get the IP if you want to access that in local from your local environment. One of the things that you need to have is right now they are not supporting the way to access this particular IP from your local environment, but you can use the port forwarding mechanism in order to access your application running on Kubernetes. So I do not want to go into that particular scenario, but you can explore the steps which I have provided in my GitHub repository, where I have explored, where I have shown how you can enable the port forwarding mechanism, and then you can access the application which I have demonstrated here. You can access the same thing using the browser, and then you will be able to see the application running on Kubernetes. So again, one of the things that you can see is you can see how the deployment looks like using this particular extension, so that you will be able to manage. So if you want to delete the deployment, you can just right click and delete, so that there will be a new deployment happening for the front end and back end. So this makes developers' life easier in order to build, containerize, test, and deploy your .NET Core application using Projecti. I think I have come to the end of the session. I took extra 15 minutes. Apologies for that. But if you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat window. I will be taking them up at the end of the session. And I hope you will enjoy the rest of the sessions from the amazing speakers that we have, and enjoy the rest of the day from the .NET Conf. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Saji, for your valuable time and the nice session we had. So any questions, guys? So we can just stray forward, like just pass team to Saji. Just maybe a quick question. I have a question, Saji, that you use this tool, TIE, right? So is it publicly available, or is it just still?
It's still in the preview mode, as I mentioned. They are releasing preview features. Again, there is an announcement that they made. Still, they are executing the features. Like, what are the development features that developers need from the top of mind? Whether they need to support all the frameworks. So they are evaluating some of the requirements from the developers. I think by the end of December, they would finalize it, what are the top requirements from the developers, and then make it generally available. But you can explore the features and then start submitting your top features that you want, so that developers will be able to get the features that they need.
So I hope it will be just in Visual Studio within one button click, rather than typing command lines like normal .NET.
I think that would be one of the features that they would be launching soon.
Okay, thanks, Saji, for your time. And I think there is no questions. If you can just send me those links you have just shared, I can just share with this guys. So that book you have,
sure, I will do that.
Plus the other links. So just shoot me and then I'll just post it here. And thanks for your time.